This is Dan from the Centre for Computing History, and today I've got a very special guest, Brendan Becker. How you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. So we started chatting just before Christmas, November time, maybe last year.
Yeah, I think I cold called you on the phone and asked you if you would be willing to stock some vinyl.
That's right. So yeah. You had some vinyl in the UK you wanted stocking, and we said, yeah, we'll do it because we have a shop here in our museum. We have a physical shop and an online shop, and we thought it'd be great, nice bit of synergy. And it particularly piqued my interest because the LP in question combines something I love, chiptunes, and something else I love, Nine Inch Nails. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. But in the meantime, what's your history? How did you get to be here? And give us your deets.
So I am. I feel like I have a similar story to most people that are nerdy or geeky or into computers or technology. I really fell into computers and technology at an early age. My dad brought home a computer from work because he was an editor at a magazine, and he had a compact portable. I'm just absolutely fascinated with anything that beeps and boops, anything with flashing lights, any sort of audio-visual experience. So I was all up in his business, trying to learn all about this machine. I learned to read when I was 2. I learned to program when I was 5. I entered kindergarten with a very high reading level because he would bring home reading software, and I wanted to learn everything I could about this thing. I thought this was just the most fascinating thing. And I know that sounds really weird to say that, I remember this fascination as, literally as a 3-year-old, but that's how much it impacted me. I over the years, there's always been a kind of a new piece of technology or something like that. A joke that I often tell about here in the States is, I'll talk about how my mom could always find me in the Sears electronics department. Right. As a kid, we would go to the mall and, we'd be there for 7 hours and I would be nowhere to be found, and she could always find me there. And so, this is just kind of something that has always been a part of my life, and that I've always been interested in. Over the years, I started with an Atari 2600 and, went to an Atari 7800 when I could return it, because it wasn't the power jack busted or something like that. And they upgraded me to a 7800. And eventually I was the kid, comparing the Nintendo to the Sega Master System by virtue of technical specifications on a sheet of paper, rather than, actually just being which games do I want to play? I'm going to buy that one. Doing the same with computers in a way. I eventually, that compact portable was held down to me, handed down, and and then that was not enough. I had to build my own PC. So I built myself a 286 at a computer show, and it was right across from this guy playing a bunch of music in the computer show. So I ended up with a whole bunch of that, and kind of slowly stair-stepping and watching. I mean, I was just your average kid, probably consuming Ninja Turtles, although I believe that you called them Hero Turtles.
Don't even.
But Saturday morning cartoon kid, tapping out music on the piano poorly that I heard in a video game, and then trying to duplicate that in BASIC, or something like that on my PC. Gosh, what else? Just playing games with friends, and being an enthusiast, but also being completely obsessed with how the inner workings of all of these, systems were, and how, learning about everything that existed at the time, learning about everything that people were trying, learning about, what was available and what was new, and like always just reading magazines and being like, that wowie zowie thing, I want to try that someday. And so that kind of all just brought me to now. I've had a variety of jobs over the years. I worked in IT for 17 years. After that, I literally just delivered pizza for Domino's. And then fell into courier work, and that actually works really well for nerds for what it's worth, because the logistics of driving places and knowing how to get places and knowing how to get there fast and that sort of a thing. All of this was pre GPS and live traffic reporting and whatever. So I was fairly good at my job because I could memorize a roadmap and because I would know which roads were busy at which times of day.
Oh my God.
So delivering pizza in a rather wide delivery area became, I don't know, easier or whatever. And, I was one of the first kids with a smartphone. I had a Sidekick back in the day, which was a hip top everywhere else, I guess. But just a simple proprietary smartphone so that I could map quest while I was on courier jobs. I still had to find which road intersection I was at, because there was no such thing as GPS, but, well, not that there was no such thing, but not on my phone anyway.
Not for you.
So I did that for a while. I helped to run a video game convention festival thing called MagFest, which was music and gaming festival. And, it started at 265 people. I grew the event to about 3,000. And now it's like 15, 20, 25,000 people, and lasts 4 days, 24 hours nonstop. So I became involved in, sort of the greater game development community and also the game music community with bands like the Mini Bosses and, people that performed video game soundtracks, both original composers and fans and whatever. And we brought them on as, guest acts at MagFest. So I did that for about, 10, 11, 12 years. And I, just until recently, I still volunteered every year. But I had to back off to that from stress, and that sort of a thing. I broke out in hives from all of the organizer stress, which was kind of terrible. Because it was kind of breaking away from, an event that I really loved. And, I didn't have a choice. My doctor said if I didn't do it, I would probably die. So I decided that, maybe I should go ahead and listen. But amidst that, if it weren't for backing off from that and backing off from my part-time day job, which I also didn't have a choice. They had a whole bunch of layoffs. And basically everyone stopped working there except for the supervisors. I wouldn't have started working on the album that I called you about, and even though it's 10 years old now, the vinyl is relatively brand new. It's been on CD forever, but we didn't press it to vinyl. And I've at this point I had something like 100, 200 requests from various people that were fans of the album. They had already downloaded it and they're like, Brendan, put it on vinyl and I'll buy it again. So, I went and showed you what you had in your hand earlier. Yeah. Oh, hey, there it is again. Yeah. So, shipped some of those to the UK. Actually found out about CCH because of my connections with chiptunes and that sort of a thing. Do you know Kieran personally? Kieran Connell?
No.
He did some of the BBC teletext demo scene stuff.
Oh goodness! Okay,
that you guys
through someone else. Yeah. Okay.
It's been a while since the teletext block party or whatever. That I think that was like 2016 ?
Yeah.
But
not long ago. But yeah.
So he did a Bad Apple in teletext and compressed the whole video down to a single floppy in teletext and contacted me for a chiptune version. of that Apple, because that's all that would fit on the floppy. And so, like I did that with him, and then I worked with him on the Prince of Persia port for the Master, and that sort of a thing. So that's how I learned about CCH. If it, I know you asked me how I got started, but now I'm telling you how I ended up calling you. So yeah, I'm absolutely notorious for going off on tangents and in weird directions. And
no, we like it. That's awesome. It's great.
Yeah.
So, so about the music, have you always been musically inclined? Was it always a thing from year dot, or?
Yeah. So I this comes as a surprise to a lot of people, but I actually don't know how to play any instruments, and I do not have any live performance talent. I can barely tap things out on the piano. I tried to learn guitar. I tried to learn bass because they said that it would be easier than learning guitar. It wasn't.
All strings.
I tried those. I tried drums. I tried woodwinds. I've tried a whole bunch of things, and nothing stuck. And also, I did have 2 pieces of musical training as a kid. One is I took like Yamaha Keyboarding 101 or whatever, which is actually kind of funny because there's a Yamaha CX5M right behind me. But this so they teach you it's piano for dummies, and the reason I call it that is they teach you on a single tier organ, and it's just everything is presets, and they teach you like single staff. I mean, I took it when I was 4 to give you an idea. So maybe 5, 4.5, something like that. So I succeeded, I guess, in this class. I learned to read sheet music, but it just didn't stick with me. I can't read sheet music. I can't read tabs. I can't read chord charts. I know what a note is, and I know that they're all relative to each other, and I understand ultra basic music theory. But really, I'm just better at saying, oh, these tones work together and these tones don't work together, and learning the steps of semitones apart from each other. But other than that, it's literally just me kind of flailing on a keyboard, being like, tap, 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 tap. How does that sound? No. Tap, 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 tap. Okay, how does that sound? That's my composing process or whatever. I do imagine a mood, like if I'm composing something original, someone's like, hey, write something sad. Someone, someone in the game just died, or, it's a moment when you got some really bad news, or, I need something to be heroic and energetic sounding. And, I can match that. I ideate a song in my head, and then I kind of write a cover version of what's in my head out on, the keyboard or whatever. So I learned to use trackers, learn. Originally, I was writing mod files, and I realized I wasn't very good at writing with real instruments and realistic sounding samples. And I spoke with Jake Kaufman, or Vert, who wrote some of the music for Shantae and a bunch of other games. And he said, hey, you need to get good. And also, why don't you study sound chips and their limitations and that sort of a thing, and try your hand at NES music. And I was already trying my hand at NES music and just failing miserably. And he told me what I needed to do to, he gave me the push I needed and the direction to go in. And then I just kind of sat home alone for a whole, however long to learn how to do, proper NES music, and wrote an entire album of Guilty Gear covers. And I say entire album, it's really more like a 10-track EP. And took it to an anime convention here in Baltimore called Otakon. And sold 50 copies in a span of a day and a half. And it completely floored me. I didn't realize that anyone would really care about, literally, it's just like NES versions of a PlayStation 2 game. It wasn't anything special. I thought the music was good. And the Guilty Gear music turned into NES, ended up sounding like Castlevania, which I thought was a good result.
Like it.
And then after that, started doing pop tributes, one a month. Did some Commodore 64, did Weezer, Say It Ain't So, and Blur Song 2. Just started doing those, and then went back and did a few more NES songs. And a year later, here was Otakon, kind of staring me in the face again. And at first, I was a little bit like, "Oh crap, I don't have anything to, show for Otakon this year." And then I was like, "Oh, but I could just make an album of all of those pop tributes that I did." So I released those. And then I decided to go big or go home and do Pretty 8 Machine. Instead of just learning NES or Commodore 64, both of which I feel I had a pretty good exposure to as a kid and that sort of a thing, it was time to learn about Sega Master System and MSX and Sega Genesis and Game Boy, which Game Boy music is insanely popular, but I just didn't fall into the Game Boy scene like all of the people that did. And so I had to teach myself Game Boy music, and that was actually more of a that was more of a stumbling block than I thought it was. The NES and the Game Boy are so similar in terms of sound hardware. So my Game Boy stuff sounds a lot like my NES stuff that I would write. But the point is that I then learned, a dozen different sound configurations or whatever, and would listen to, the original Pretty Hate Machine, and something in the song would send me off in a direction. And this is how it worked with the pop covers and everything else too. But, I'd be like, "Oh, that instrument reminds me of, like such and such that that the whatever system does." And then I'd go off and, write in a direction and that sort of a thing. But none of this would be possible if I hadn't, built this computer at a computer show and suddenly accidentally gotten obsessed with sound cards from the guy across the aisle that was, playing disc after disc after disc of mod files. Writing, I wrote some fairly, embarrassing soundtracks for a Dr. Mario clone and for a platformer that we wrote when I was in high school with some friends, and I was their music guy. And for some reason, this spreadsheet with a play button works in my head. I don't know, I still the sheet music is long gone. I can count up the staff. Every good boy does. Okay, that's an F. But that's my limit as far as decent quick music theory. I just don't. I don't speak that language, but I do speak trackerese or whatever. It has taken me to some interesting places. I did get to meet Trent Reznor after doing Pretty 8 Machine, and there's a picture. I accidentally broke his rule. I forget. It's like some rocker or whatever once said, "There's no smiling in rock and roll." Right. And I think Trent and really took that to heart, and just never smiled when he was performing shows or whatever. And I accidentally got him to break his rule when we met. So I'm sorry, Trent. There's a picture of us smiling on the internet, but it's on the back insert because honestly, it's a really great picture. I had just asked him there was a bouncer in a green room taking just picture after picture of us. And I was like, "Trent, do you make faces in photos?" Asking if he'd stick his tongue out or, something like that. And he's like, "Give me a face." And I just made some really stupid face. It was probably really embarrassing and whatever. And we both just, cracked up. And that was when his bouncer took that picture that you saw in the end. So that was honestly just a mistake, but it was because it was a mistake. It was also genuine. I really like that picture. So yeah, we're way off into Pretty 8 Machine land, but did I answer how I guess I also would program songs in BASIC. There's the play command which you can enter music markup language or MML and be like, I want to play this note for this duration, this note for this duration, this note for this duration. And you put it in, a string variable, and then you can be like, play a $sign or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I did a little bit of that before I had a sound card, but the sound card would really kick things off for me. I was using a whole litany of trackers. The one I really fell in love with once I actually had the ability, I used Scream Tracker for a while, Scream Tracker 2, because it would run on CGA, which I was stuck with for, like a limited period of time. But then I discovered Whacker Tracker by a demo group. What a great name, right? And started writing mods in that. And then I discovered Fast Tracker 1. And then Scream Tracker 3 came out, and I had just watched Second Reality and Panic from the Future Crew, which was insanely popular in the demo scene. And here, like, the CompUSA, which is this like giant computer department store, was showing the demos on their computer that was designed to demonstrate different speakers, like the Altec Lansing speaker setups or whatever. And you could push a button to choose, here's what the stereo speakers sound like. Here's what the one with the subwoofer sounds like. By the way, do you have a sound card? Maybe you should get one. Here's a sound blaster, stuff like that. So they were using demo scene stuff to show off that machine. That was when I learned. I was like, okay, the music in this demo sounds way better than the mod files I've heard so far. And I learned that they were using Scream Tracker 3. I actually, and I had internet access at the time. This was pre-web, so I was FTPing all of my files. And before that, I guess I was a part of the BBS scene, and that's where I would get a lot of mods. Got in trouble downloading stuff from long distance phone calls with my mother at one point. But anyway, so eventually, after the getting in trouble with my mom part, I actually downloaded Scream Tracker 3 from a guy I had met on the internet. We didn't have a way to attach it to the email that we were sending. It was too big and it didn't work. And he couldn't just tell me which FTP he got it from. So I actually arranged an international phone call, and we only connected at, I want to say, 7,200 baud. We both had 28.8s, but the line quality was just so poor. And I made an international phone call to Australia and downloaded Scream Tracker 3, the beta, from this guy so that I could try out Scream Tracker 3. And I fell in love with Scream Tracker 3 for about a year and a half, and then Fast Tracker 2 came out. And Fast Tracker 2 worked more with the way my brain worked because I had been writing mods so long, so I had trouble adjusting to Scream Tracker. I enjoyed my time there, but like Fast Tracker just made more sense. And also, one, I had used Whacker Tracker a lot. Two, Fast Tracker also sort of just resembled Whacker Tracker because they were both made to imitate, like Sound Tracker clones, and Noise Tracker and Pro Tracker and whatever. So, so there was a huge section of my life where I was writing mod files, and then chiptunes happened somehow, and but then they were like, oh well, to write the most authentic chiptunes, you need to learn to use a tracker, and I was like, oh well, that part's already done. Like I just needed to like find the specific trackers, like Fami Tracker for writing Famicom or NES stuff, and Goat Tracker for writing NES stuff, or not NES stuff, Commodore 64 stuff, sorry. And, Defel Mask with, like shout outs to Leonardo and his team for multi-console, Sega Genesis Mega Drive stuff. It's been all downhill from there,
No, man. I mean, you've had a couple albums published, and of course you've had, this one again.
Yeah.
What's the genesis for this? How did this exactly come about then?
The so Pretty 8 Machine Well, yeah, I needed that thing to do after I had basically effectively lost all forms of work. And I was with an artist friend, my buddy Dave, who draws anime and manga style art. And he would offer me a place to sell my CDs at a table and we would set up in an artist alley, and we'd just keep each other company whenever I went and go to anime conventions together. So we're sitting at this anime convention in Ohio, and someone comes by and hears some music from Retro Covered and some other songs and whatever. And I had just done my CeeLo cover that got covered on Wired, and I did this. It's I called it F6502 because it kind of sounds like "Forget You," and I'm just playing stuff, and this guy comes by. He's like, "Hey, do you have any chiptune covers of Nine Inch Nails?" And I was like, "Oh, of course, someone on the internet has to have done this." And I went that night and searched for some, and I didn't find like anything. Not like I would have been expecting, and not like not like my covers and tributes work and whatever. And so I'm sitting there, like kind of flustered and can't believe that none of it has really been done. And I was like, well, screw it. I'll just write a minute of Head Like a Hole on a Commodore 64 sound setup, and spent, 2.5 hours on it. I think I even fell asleep on my laptop just working on it. And the next day comes around, we go back to the table, and the guy comes by again. And I was like, hey, check out this Nine Inch Nails cover, and just hit play on that. And I had set the loop point so it didn't really end, and so I could just fade it out and, that sort of a thing. And he's like, where did you get this? And I was like, well, and I had to come clean. I just told him, well, I couldn't find anything, so I just wrote this, like in a pinch in the hotel room. And he's like, you have to do the rest. You have to do the whole album. I was like, oh, well, I guess I could, I love Nine Inch Nails. So, it's not really a matter of, well, I don't want to or whatever. It was just, I didn't really, it didn't occur to me, I guess. And then the game dealer that was selling downstairs from the artist alley, I went and played it for him because he was the one that sold my Guilty Gear album at Otakon, several years prior and whatever. And I was like, hey, Carlson, check this out, and played it at his booth and whatever. And he's like, you're going to finish the album, right? And said the same thing, right? And so I was like, oh gosh, so now I've got two requests. I was like, Carlson, I don't know if I can do this. I just lost, my job, and, I got to figure some stuff out. And he's like, if you finish, the rest of this album, I will buy 100 copies and sell them at shows and whatever. And I was like, okay, well, he might have only said 50, but, he was a huge supporter of the album and the idea in the early days. And then, went back and talked to friends about it. I was like, all right, well, let's do, Terrible Lie on the Atari, and let's do, Down in It on the NES. And suddenly I had, 2 completed songs and then 3 half songs and whatever. And I was performing chiptunes live at open mics at biker bars and,
Wow.
Weird stuff, just trying to kind of find my place in, Central Virginia at the time, and getting booked at game conventions. And a guy, actually three different guys right around the 2010 when I started on the album, had heard some of my other stuff and had heard the Nine Inch Nails stuff and booked me to do game soundtracks. 3 different, actually, and one of them I literally just finished. We worked on the game for 13 years. Yeah, right. And it's an NES game, or NES aesthetic game, that is just released a couple of years ago on Switch and Steam. And he has just gotten permission to put it on Xbox. I don't know if he's going to work with Sony and get it on PSN or whatever, but it's called Treachery in Beatdown City. And and he is this year releasing a DLC for free that triples the size of the game. Because, like we kind of just did an episode 1 of the game and didn't have the resources to finish. And then he just revved and kicked it into high gear, and finished the rest. So there's that. There's a space shoot 'em up called the Shuttle Scuttle. And then the guy, Dan, that did Rivals of Ether, which is kind of like a Smash Brothers clone, although maybe clone is not giving it enough credit, an indie version of Smash Brothers. Yeah. He went to Drexel, and while he was at Drexel, his final school project was to write a Game Boy demake of Smash Brothers, and contacted me for a Game Boy version of some of the Smash Brothers themes and whatever. And so like all 3 of these were actually kind of going on at the same time for a period of time. I was doing Game Boy, I was doing NES, and not really, working with anything else. You said, tell me about the genesis of Pretty 8 Machine. And I feel like I've given you that answer and more probably by now. But also I finally got started doing Sega Genesis or Mega Drive, work. So I did another entire EDM album on the Mega Drive, and released that as another game soundtrack. And that will, I know I promised this to people like 8 years ago or something like that, but we are finally releasing a cartridge album.
Oh, wow.
So that you can pop it in your Sega and listen to the album on a real Sega coming out of the real hardware, and even remix the album in real time, and that sort of a thing. So that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to that.
That will be absolutely amazing.
So so all of that is my persona as Inverse Phase, if you will.
So what was your process for choosing what sound clips would appear on what song on the album? How did you go through that?
It was really just a matter of figuring out, like, I sort of mentioned, I'm probably on the spectrum. So I will listen to, and I know this is not how most people listen to music. But when I'm listening to, I don't know, the radio or something, gosh, I sound like an old codger, but I'll hear a song and like an instrument will remind me of something, or, whenever, and so I'll just be like, oh, well, that bass distortion thing sounds like the sort of gritty, nasty bass that you get out of an Atari. And I'll just be like, okay, so let's write that bass line, out of that song using the bass for the Atari. And does it sound good? Okay. And then craft the rest of the, the song around that, and that sort of a thing. So that's probably the easiest way to explain, what I attempt to do anyway.
Yeah, because there's a lot of machinery in this album. You use the Pokey, there's Yamaha, there's the SID, obviously. Do you have any favorites you like working with, and you find particularly?
So all of them have this like very, and I mean like you probably don't need to tell chiptune aficionados this or whatever, but all of the computers, especially from the 80s and consoles, all have this very specific signature sound, right? And in part directly related to, a sound will remind me of a configuration or whatever. I really kind of prefer to write, for the system that I'm reminded of, and be like, oh, this would fit really good on this. This would fit really good on this, and kind of, I don't know, appreciate each system for its own unique qualities, that sort of a thing. That's not to say that occasionally I don't like playing favorites and writing SID music or, whatever. But I do have a certain love for the way all of these hardware developers tried to solve various problems, like the MSX and the Famicom can both use sound chips in cartridges. Which, I mean, like, maybe isn't a surprise to you, but maybe someone here who's listening is like, holy crap, I didn't realize you could put a sound chip in a game cartridge. And that was like a solution to getting better sound out of your game. It's like, really? So I think that's, kind of a genius move. Or the VRC6, especially integrating it into the memory controller, and so I think that's very creative. The SID, obviously, I think Yanis is quoted as saying, I wanted to have a sound chip for a computer that was actually designed by someone with musical inclinations. And it's funny because I actually got to personally confirm that. Arguably, the previous chip to the SID that was most musically capable would be the AY38910 or YM2149, which was in the Speccy, in the MSX, in the CPC, in the Vectrex, in the Intellivision, in two of them in Tron, whatever. It's like everywhere. It's a very universally recognized sound chip, and it's in a lot of hardware. 4 years ago, I got to meet the inventor of the chip, Steve Burstein. Okay. And I asked him about his music background, and that sort of a thing. He's like, honestly, I was just an electrical engineer, fresh out of college, and this guy would come by my office every once in a while and be like, we're developing a new arcade game chipset. It would be cool if, it's for a racing game. It'd be cool if each sound channel could be each car for the player in the game, because it's going to be a 3-player game. And he's like, okay, well, I'll design something like that. And then, he told me, he's like, really, I just went out and got books about, music theory and sound theory and the theory of how your ears work. And, he learned about, exponential, amplitudes and whatever being how the ear, hears things and, that sort of thing. He's like, and I just kind of wrote what I had learned on paper into a sound chip and tried to get it to work. And conveniently for him, he said that the 8910 worked first try. He actually, and back then people are literally using a grease pen and drawing integrated circuits on Mylar and then shrinking the Mylar down. And that's how they drew and designed chips back in the day. He said his first design worked, which I find incredible. That has to be a really arduous process. But I was like, so Steve, do you have any musical training or whatever? And he was like, I was just like a nerdy engineer guy, and I wanted to design something. So it's possible. We don't have the ability anymore to ask the Pokey team. I did some research work to try and find people that design specifically the music circuit in the Pokey, and like the waveform creation and whatever. And specifically for the Pokey, I found some documents and whatever, and they talk about it a little bit, but you can't really find anyone talking about it. And arguably, since the Pokey loses pitch towards one end, thanks to exponential and the divider for the clock, basically. And then jumping over to the other sound chip that would be out around the same time, the SN76489, which is what's in your beloved Beeb, and many other machines, the Master System. This, I also did some research, called up, people that worked with TI and, whatever on this chip. And it seems like with the SN76489, no one wants to take credit for it. I don't know if they're just like not proud of it or whatever, but like now it's out there, it's a piece of history, and I wanted to, get information. But to my knowledge, like Bob's chip, the SID, is the first, music chip designed by a musician or, at least someone who has musical inclinations.
Yeah.
And so, I got to hand it to him for that. He did a lot of, he was very Moog inspired, filters and selectable sound waves and very like forward looking things that no other sound chip does. So I'll go ahead and sing the praises of the SID, much to the chagrin of anyone who didn't have a 64.
True.
I know that even now in the demo scene, there's still people that are like, I'm going to write something that will play something that is SID quality on a Beeb or something like that. And, people are constantly striving to, I don't know, achieve that greatness or, but it's truly a cool chip. The only thing that I'm bummed about is that the SID didn't have more channels. And I know that Bob Yanis was also very upset that he couldn't design a more advanced chip. He wanted the 64 to just kill it in terms of sound. But there's a quote out there that was like, this is already 10 times better than it needs to be and 100 times better than anything else out there. You should ship it. And so he did. I don't know. It's a neat chip. I'm building my own synthesizer from scratch, and my own tracker from scratch, because nothing will compose this thing that I literally just built. So soon I'll have a tracker called CTM, which you can look up on YouTube if you want, and a synthesizer that doesn't have a name. I have individual boards that drive a SID or drive an 8910 or drive, a Pokey or whatever. And so there are it's not like a mod player where there are drivers for, whatever sound card or whatever. It's the only drivers are for USB output to bitbang the chips. So the computer running, I'm writing the tracker in Python. I'm sorry to all involved. But the Python app will just send USB commands to these boards.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then the boards will control the hardware at their native clock as if they're in their native environment. So the chip, not that the chip knows whether it's in a Commodore 64 or not, but, it will be producing hopefully authentic music that would absolutely be possible on a 64. And then I get tasked with writing, conversion filters and whatever to load in all of the things that I've written in, like emulators or Unreal hardware and play them in my own software. But I've learned a whole lot about signaling these chips and, like their capabilities and that sort of a thing along the way. So I'm excited to finally take all of this knowledge and put it together and do something cool with it that isn't just music, like writing a tool or whatever. That'll be a really good feeling once it's done. So.
It's very cool. So, I'm a huge chiptune fan. It's on my PC wherever I'm in the museum, whenever I'm working with those chiptunes. It drives other people crazy. I love it.
Yeah.
It gets old. So when you start out, Pre-8 Machine came out in 2012?
2013 for the special edition.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So, and again, before
it's 10 years old.
Yeah. Before you'd be doing things like conventions and making your own little tributes and stuff. So, but was that quite underground thing then? Because I think now chiptunes is it's not quite mainstream, but I think it's a bit more popular, a bit more awareness. You see chiptunes veer into synthwave and chillwave and all these other things.
I absolutely. So, working here at a museum, I get a unique opportunity to, interact with people and ask them what they've heard of and ask them what they know about and that sort of a thing. And I would say if it were 20 years ago, if I asked someone what a chiptune was, they wouldn't know. Right. And then I'd have to say, 8-bit music like on the old Nintendo or something like that. And suddenly they'd be like, oh, yeah, of course I know what that is. The term chiptune really started, maybe the mid 90s.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit earlier than that, specifically because of the Amiga. So there was, if you could fit a mod file into chip memory, which is, like the Amiga's equivalent of conventional RAM, then it was considered a chiptune. Whether or not it sounded like, it sounded like, an old console or not, was not even relevant. Although most people would specifically write ultra tiny, single, loops that would, like sound like a console, but kind of maybe a fake console. So it was actually kind of around the same time. And some people take this as a slight, but I don't think that they should. They would, some music they would call 8-bit and some music they would call fake bit, which was, like kind of, a fake imitation of 8-bit. And that, I actually thoroughly enjoy a lot of fake bit stuff. Some of the early fake bit that I listened to, not that he doesn't also write authentic chiptunes, but Matt Simmons, does both authentic and, fake bit chiptunes and whatever. So, like that's some of this first Amiga chippy stuff that I ever heard. But before that, I mean, like if we even just go to like the 80s, there was certainly a SID scene. You could download SID music from BBSs and, stuff like that. And, the demo scene was, like sending or, like people in the demo scene, I should say, were ripping music out of games and that sort of a thing and using them in intros. And, so there was arguably there was a chiptune scene in, say, 1985. I just think we didn't call it a chiptune scene. That term wouldn't happen for another 5 or 10 years. And now people can just walk into the museum and I say, do you know what a chiptune is? And they're like, yeah. Yeah. I was like, oh, really? Okay, good. Like, because I was around for the era where they didn't. But yeah. So
I was having a talk here with one of my colleagues about how up until the CD-ROM, up until PlayStation, that sort of thing, and we can take an orchestra and put real music on a CD, and that's the norm now. So chiptunes kind of went away at early night. But I always feel it's cheating. I've always had more reverence for like chiptunes because the labor that goes into getting these sounds from a sound chip, as opposed to, oh, here's a guy who plays guitar, here's a guy on the keyboard making beautiful things like music, and we record it, put it on a CD and put it in the game.
Yeah.
There's always a great reverence for like the agony of like making chiptunes.
Yeah. I don't know that I feel like, I guess, how to put this, you're when you say cheating, that's relatable to me. But I think it's specifically when it is old hardware playing samples, like especially, like playing, although, there's like, so there's a hack involved to get some of this hardware to play samples at all, which is kind of odd, right? But then there's also, like the fact that you're not doing something, I don't know, you are still doing something cool with the hardware, but you're not doing something musical with the hardware. Right. Then the task is just, how do I, get these samples to play back on this hardware? And it's all about the memory and CPU and loading tricks to get, like a full minute of audio into RAM on a Commodore 64 or something like that. Which again, I think that I think that's amazing. I love showing people stuff like, Wonderland on the Commodore 64, which plays, like Prodigy for a full, like minute and a half, 2 minutes or whatever. And even has, like raster graphics while it's going to show you that they still have time to display video, even with all of that going on. And it sounds fantastic and it looks fantastic. And like, I am absolutely blown away by like the things that, for example, the demo scene have accomplished, but at the same time, like, I think part of it is just, like you've been given this chip. How can you make something musically cool with it? And there are times where I'm like, that isn't a programming problem. That's a musician problem.
Yeah.
You know, like how do we solve this as musicians rather than as, you know, like as programmers and whatever. And really the best result is when you get both of them banging their heads together and figuring something out. But I think it's maybe just that there are different aesthetic choices, you know, and that's maybe why it feels like cheating to me. Is, you know, like if I could just play the sample rather than trying to figure out how to synthesize an orchestral hit or, you know, something like that, you know, then maybe I should just do that, you know. But then the other part of me is like, but, you know, like think about how cool it would be if you could play an orchestral hit and be like, you know, that's just like square waves, you know, like,
yeah.
And so, you know, I think there's a challenge from both sides of the equation, and it's fun. But yeah, I do agree. It's like, it's so easy now to just, you know, like make a soundtrack, record it. And, you know, I mean, as far as playing back audio on new hardware, you know, you just put a recording in memory and you say, hey, sound device, play this, you know, like it's easy.
It's too easy. Yeah, it's strange like that. The whole N64 and the PlayStation, that cut-off point is really interesting to me. Like I've got much more. I enjoy the sounds that come out of an N64 far more than I enjoy the sounds that come out of a PlayStation, for example. That's just a weird quirk of mine. You know,
yeah. As the consoles get newer, arguably technology gets more boring, and I guess that works with computers too. You know, like I think that. And maybe there's another thing to consider, and that is that when computers are old, it's more of a sort of a Wild West, you know. There's people are just like trying to find their way and trying to throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, and, you know, like just learning how the technology, you know, what if we tried this? And, you know, like suddenly, you know, you end up with this new piece of hardware, and like all of that is very exciting. You know, and now it's just like a PC and a Mac happen to be the same thing, built in the same Foxconn, you know, factory in China or whatever, you know, like, and the only thing that's different is like the firmware and the logo that goes on the outer shell, you know, like, so yeah, computers got boring, and, you know, back then, at least there was something, there was something new to be excited for. And
it's true.
Yeah, there's a little bit of, there's nostalgia for actually experiencing the thing, and then there's nostalgia for being excited for the thing.
Yeah.
You know, true, and that's very real.
Yeah, because you know, you will never be as excited about the PlayStation 6 as you're excited for the SNES or the Mega Drive or like the first PlayStation.
Or at least the PS1, yeah, we were super excited for.
Yeah.
Suddenly CDs, you know, but yeah, it's wild.
All right. I mean, I could talk about chiptunes all day, but what are you doing now, and what are your current ongoing projects?
Yeah. So, well, I did mention that I just finished a 13-year game soundtrack.
Awesome.
So by the time anyone is able to watch this, there will probably be some Beatdown City music online. The episode 1 soundtrack is already out there, but I'm hoping to do a cohesive, complete soundtrack for the entire game. And so that'll be out. The game itself releases in April, or something like that. The update to the game, I should say. The game is out. Get the game. And actually, if you get the game now, you'll get the DLC for free. Not that if you don't buy it later, you'll also get the whole thing for free. The point is that all of this is finishing up right as I clean a giant office building with an IT company in it, so that we can have 3 computer, game, and electronics museums under one roof. So my current project, my entity is Bloop, which is the Bloop Museum, things that go bleep bloop, you know. Yeah, I see you like that. But the other museum in this building, the IT company is called System Source. And for the longest time, they ran something called the System Source Computer Museum. but they also applied for educational nonprofit, and we've both got it now. So their entity is called the Maryland Technology Museum.
Okay.
And I would argue to maybe keep things on the short side that the combination of Maryland Technology Museum and Bloop is probably very similar to what CCH is trying to accomplish. So, if anyone watching this is ever in the States or currently in the States or whatever, come on up to Hunt Valley where we are, and we want a huge focus on not just like pointing at a bunch of things behind glass, but rather a bunch of computers out that you can interact with, that you can play with, that you can use. I'm working on maintaining a sizable software library, which actually I believe you are going to help me with.
We are. It's ready to go. Well, nearly ready to go. But we're going to send you some cool software, some UK specific software for you to.
Yeah, so then we can show people what gaming and using computers was like in the rest of the world. Yeah. I want this to be a place where people can come and learn and maybe not feel like they're learning. It's to make learning fun, which sounds like a cliche thing that every school teacher has said in the past, but more like maybe a better way to put it is to sneak education into an already fun time. People can just walk in and turn on our Apple II and, bam, a copy of Oregon Trail comes up that I pirated from grade school back in the day. Shh, don't tell anyone. But the legit copy is in the back, but the one that I, copied is the one that goes in the Apple II. But I have such a love for all of the hardware and software. And I already mentioned, like I was the kid that, reads magazines or whatever. And I'd be like, I want to know what happened to that thing, And so I've just kind of cultivated that desire and interest and whatever into largely an area or a space or whatever that people can come in, learn, have fun. And, when inevitably we, go off on tangents like we've done 30 times in this call and whatever, and be like, oh, have you heard of that thing? Or, like, oh my God, if you like this, maybe you would like that. And they'd be like, that thing, I've never heard of that thing. And we can be like, let me show you. And it just happens to be right here so that I can kind of, help cultivate interests, and help people maybe find a new thing that they love and, that sort of a thing. So that's what I'm trying to do with Bloop and Maryland Technology Museum. And soon we'll have National Electronics Museum in this space too.
Oh my goodness.
So that'll be really cool. We're cleaning up the back right now. So,
that's so much going on. That sounds absolutely crazy. Oh, well, it's been absolutely wonderful chatting with you today. Any last minute plugs? Where can people find you?
I'd really love it if people they can look up Pretty 8 Machine and all of my other music on, I would really prefer that you look me up on Bandcamp. You can just type Inverse Phase into it. It's also just inversephase.bandcamp.com or, link in comments or description, whatever. But you can also go to inversephase.com or find Inverse Phase on all of the social media stuff or whatever. And the same for Bloop. We have bloopmuseum.com. That really, I'm sorry again, it currently just redirects to a Patreon because we don't have a real website yet. But we're working on it. We just, we've got a lot on our plate. But you can also just come here, if you're able to make it or you're already in Maryland or whatever. I'm in the museum like 10 to 10, 7 days a week. So there's a highly good chance that I will be around to show you around. Just send me an email and ask me if you can visit tomorrow or something like that. That's the easiest way Since it's in an IT company, it's kind of weird. You can't just like walk in the front door. Someone buzzes you into the IT building, and then you come back, and it's like suddenly there's a museum taking up half of the IT company. But other than that, sort of like weird, it's strange parking at an office building that doesn't say museum on the front door. It really is just a fun space that you can come and experience anything. We are probably not nearly as busy as CCH. You can, you're like, yeah, maybe not, but no, I literally give like, I don't know, a tour or two every day or two. And tours, I'm not going to say tours are required, but tours are strongly encouraged. And the reason is just that, we want people to come in, and I like giving off the cuff sort of, let me know something about you so that I can fill in your knowledge with, things that are actually relevant, and actually teach you something while you're here. So anyway, once you're through all of that, but we are also, just Bloop Museum on the big three social medias. And actually, I recently just signed up for Mastodon for both Inverse Phase and Bloop Museum, and so they're both up there. Inverse Phase is on hackers.town, and Bloop Museum is on oldbytes.space, which I think are both apt. So really, I think the strongest thing that I could leave people with is, hey, find me and check out some of my stuff online, and then chat with me online. I love to talk to people. If that wasn't immensely evident by our chat here.
Pretty amenable. That's absolutely amazing. And if you're interested, people, I think we are the only UK stockist of this. Maybe even the only.
There is one record store a little bit southwest of London.
Really?
That has it, and that's because my buddy Kieran lives near there and suggested it. Right. But yeah, it really, if you're going to go anywhere, actually, the best reason to buy it at CCH is because the proceeds will not only help me but help CCH.
True.
So you can support the museum by buying my album at the museum. So Brilliant. You should absolutely do it.
Yeah, support independent music and us. What's not to love? It's available on our website, links below, all that jazz.
Sure.
I personally vouch for it. I think it's great. I love it. It's great.
I'm glad you like
it. Awesome. Well, in that case, thanks again for taking up so much of your morning. It's just gone 25 past 5 in the UK. What time is it for you over there?
Yeah, it's 12:30, so it's time for lunch for me.
Lunchtime. I'm interrupting your lunchtime. Well, again, thanks so much for talking to me today. This has been absolutely amazing, and keep in touch.
You're very welcome. Great talking to you, Dan.
Take it easy now.